Hello and welcome to Frisella's All Around the Yard. I am your host, Tony Frisella, along with, I'm going to call you my co-host now.
Yay!
Juliana Kozik, who is our assistant manager at the Garden Center here at Frisella Nursery, who does so many wonderful things for our customers. She was just talking about being invited to a dinner because, I mean, that's how closely she works with a lot of the clients that come to the Garden Center. She has a passion for your success. If you're coming in here, ask for Juliana, and you will not be disappointed. Just make sure you plan enough time in the day because she will get talking.
Chatty.
So, Juliana, thank you for joining us today.
Awesome.
And hopefully this is going to be more of a permanent thing with you on the podcast. And hopefully that helps us be more consistent with the podcast because my schedule seems to be getting tighter and tighter.
And you know I want more stuff to do. So I don't mind. I love it.
So, a conversation today is around fall gardening. Mm-hmm. We're going to keep it a little more high level, but there's usually a lot of things that people are starting to see. Some trees are starting to lose their leaves, like the walnuts and those kind of things. So it's starting to make people think, okay, well, what do I need to be doing in my yard? So let's have that conversation. Have you recently had anybody come into the garden center just asking, so hey, what should we be doing? I know a lot of people ask, is this the right time to plant?
Exactly. And it is the right time to plant. It's very good for your trees to plant this time of year in the fall. Most trees, they're going into dormancy. They're losing their leaves, they're getting red, they're going to sleep for the winter. You get them in there, their root system's doing their thing through the winter. They're happy as can be. They like it. They're getting plenty of time before they do their major energy using, which is pushing leaves. And that takes up a lot of energy. They need to rest up for the winter. They're a living thing, much like us. I kind of equate them to maybe a grizzly bear. They're trying to get ready for that big spring when they're pushing leaves and they're using a lot of energy.
Storing everything into the roots,
Storing everything in the root system so they can get ready and give you a great spring show with those leaves.
So what do you think are right now some of the best things to plant?
Well,
and it's a wide variety, but just give a few things
absolutely.
that common
Right
homeowner
now
might be planting.
is absolutely the best time if you're talking about trees. We're going to do maples right now. That's that awesome time you're seeing the fall color. We're going to get those guys in the ground. Once you start seeing the fall color and in the trees, and I know a lot of people don't understand this, and I'm starting to learn a little bit more as I'm taking, my arborist test. I'm learning about what's happening in that tree when it goes into dormancy or we go into fall.
It's a very complex process what's going on, just in the leaves themselves.
We try to make it a little simple for you, but I'll give you kind of a Reader's Digest version. And what's happening is photosynthesis is stopping.
And why is it stopping?
Why is it stopping? Because the winter is
coming. Days are getting shorter.
Days are shorter. So nights are getting longer.
The photosynthesis is what the leaves use to create energy for the plant. And now that the days are getting shorter, so now the color's starting to go away.
Color's starting to go away. The green is coming out of that. What happens when you get a red leaf, though, the glucose is in the sugar in that leaf is kind of frozen into that leaf. And that becomes the red in it. And so that's why you get some red, some are green, some with the chlorophyll kind of leaches out of that. You get maybe a lighter green color, maybe those yellow colors in there.
Purples.
And the purples. With the maples, for the red maples, that glucose is in that leaf and gets kind of stuck in there during this time, and that's what creates that red. So that's what's happening in your tree at that point. Remember, chlorophyll's kind of going away. That's the green part of the photosynthesis. The chlorophyll's in there. And so it's getting ready to go to sleep. It's signaling the tree it's time for winter. And that's what's happening in the fall. And that's why you lose the leaves, too.
So, again, it goes back to the maples of why, maples, there's river birch are a great time to be planting those trees right now. Because the things about what people have to consider, too, is when's the right time, what plants are the right time to prune, which ones are not the right time to prune. You usually want to prune your maples and your river birch in the late fall, early winter because the sap is low. the
Correct.
sap in these trees tends to rise quite rapidly towards the middle and end of winter because they become activated faster than your oaks do. That is, you notice that in the springtime, you usually see the red maples flower out with the little red tassels on the end of it, and it's usually weeks before the oaks do. So the sap is rising quicker. You don't want it to, you want to avoid as much of the bleed as possible. But when it comes to fall planting, I guess what would we not plant? Let's start with that, because it's a smaller family of plants.
So I don't recommend planting a southern maple or southern magnolia. I'm sorry, southern magnolia in the fall. I would rather plant that guy in the spring. Our winters are a little harsh for those guys, and they really need that whole time from spring into winter to get ready for that first winter that they're in the ground. That is one tree. Dogwoods I would prefer to do in the spring. Redbuds, some of those flowering things, they're a little more delicate. They don't take the winter as hard. They take the winter pretty hard.
On the dogwoods, you would tend to lose some of the blooms. Basically,
Absolutely.
is what you would tend. I mean, it's not that you can't. You just if
can't.
if it's a one tree in your yard and you're just putting something for a show, And so it's not that big of a deal.
I would prefer that. I'm going to say we can do it. We can still plant it. It's just if it were me and my tree and I want the best blooms I can get, I'm going to do it in the spring.
So, some other things are with the evergreens right now. Something to be considering is we're in a dry period right now. We're not getting a lot of rainwater. And the rain we do get is usually fast and quick and not enough to soak into the ground. And so the root systems tend to get dry. And that's where, again, we're trying to hold all the energy, all of our nutrients, and everything we need to have a strong spring. But with your evergreens, since they don't lose their leaves, the foliage basically becomes a straw for the cold, dry winds of winter to take the water out of the ground. So as irrigation systems start getting shut off here in the next couple of weeks, it's very important that people understand that they need to still take a hose out and slow soak their plants, depending on the size, depends on how long you need to soak them, but we're talking a trickle, drip, 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 drip at the end of it. If it's a 3-4 inch caliper tree, you might do that for 8 hours and then take it off for 2 weeks. And then give it time to dry out. Now, if you're getting if it's really dry and we're not getting any moisture, any kind of precipitation that's going to add up, you may have to do it weekly.
Exactly.
But you have to get into the ground to check, because that's a lot of stuff going on right now. It's dry, leaves are falling, leaves are covering the ground, and so even those fast rains, even more so now than ever, that water's just running off the top, not even getting to the dirt, to even just wet the top.
So what you want to do is you got to keep that plant hydrated so it can give itself a chance to get through that winter. Remember, like Anthony said, it's going to be straw-like. You want to give it that hydration in that root system so it can survive that winter. It's not going to freeze. Remember, we've got a lot of warmth in that ground. We've had all these hot summer days, these warm winters. That's keeping that ground really, really warm. And that's what helps your root system to kind of do its thing, to feed to get ready for the next spring.
So, some other things that I've considered to watch, what not to plant is a lot of cases azaleas, rhododendron, most of your perennials. Liriope's fine, catmint's fine. I mean, those things are pretty tough.
I really try to, make people understand. You want to hit that like October 15th date. You want to get everything in the ground as far. That's your freeze date. And in the spring, our April 15th plant date, our October 15th is our freeze date. You want to get your perennials in the ground by then. Sooner the better right now. It's great to plant perennials right now. We're having a perennial sale, so we want to get some of those things into the ground so they have the best.
We ourselves, at least when in the landscape side, we stopped planting perennials October 15th. And we used to start planting them again April 15th. We've bumped that back now till May because of the late freezes that we've been having.
It's been crazy.
Last winter especially, the late freeze we had we were up the 1st of May
April
almost.
20th.
Yeah, April 20th, where we had the bonfires going out there. Also when you plant perennials late in the season, you have a chance of the freeze heaving them out of the ground. Even though they might survive, like the riope, you have a chance of them heaving out of the ground. Or if you're in a heavily deer populated area, deer could very easily pull them out of the ground. And I don't know who doesn't have deer these days. I thought my deer were tame around my house in the woods, but now they just start finding their way into my landscape. So Yeah, so right now, trees, we're getting ready to start harvesting as the leaves start falling. Once the leaves go to the fall color, that's when we start digging. Evergreens, we're already been digging for the last few weeks. Once their foliage hardens off in mid to late summer, depending on the variety of plant, we start digging those at that point in time and keep going. That's what creates our fresh stock for next year. Now, going to maintaining the garden through the fall. There are some fall weeds. There are some things that do still seem to persist. A lot of your crabgrass is slowing down. In some cases, changing colors. It's getting its fall color. It's been seeing that a little bit. Nutgrass is starting to subside. Johnson grass starting to subside. All starting to slow down as our temperatures start to dwindle during the day. But I guess if you were to give somebody some advice on what they should be looking for weed-wise right now, and or just some general maintenance to the landscape beds or garden beds, what would you say is something to be thinking of?
So what I would do if it were my garden, I would make sure I would keep pulling my weeds, and we physically get down there and pull them. They're going to be easy to pull out this time of year. They're not, the root system's getting kind of a little weaker on them. They're easy to pull out. They're going into their dormancy too, so you want to get those out. You spoke about that heave and the frost heave. If you're concerned about your liripe and some of these other plants, you want to do a light layer you want to do some mulching around them too and on them. You're worried about them heaving out of the ground. If you do a light layer of mulching, then using some of maybe your clippings from when you cut back, some of that natural mulch will be fine for that to help that heave. Remember, if you've got any plants that you've had issues with, maybe some disease, you don't want to keep any of that for mulch. You want to get rid of that. Don't even compost it. Don't do anything
point.
with that. You also want to make sure you're sanitizing pruners in between each cut of anything that could possibly have disease in it, because you don't want to transfer that to anything else or any healthy branches.
And right now also, something to think about is cultivating your mulch. Because the mulch from down the springtime in most cases, and with all the dry weather that we've been having, that mulch can tend to basically create a pretty thick layer and not allow water to penetrate into it. It might be holding moisture underneath it, but a lot of water will be running, a lot of storm water, especially in the dry period, will be running over the top of it. So, scratching the surface, loosening it up will allow any rainfall precipitation we get to get into the root system of these plants that we were just talked about a little bit ago, about why it's so important to make sure they stay hydrated, especially as the irrigation systems get turned off. Products to use in the fall, or thinking about to be using in the fall. A couple of things. Plant tone is something we definitely suggest going into.
And or tree tone too for your trees.
Correct.
Plant tone and tree tone. Holly tone in the fall for your acid-loving plants, your azaleas, your rhododendrons.
Many of your evergreens.
Evergreens especially. Your hollies, it's holly tone. It is, your hydrangeas, all acid-loving, heavy feeder plants. You definitely want to do that.
And then, other things to be thinking about is to be preparing for wintertime, that you'll want to hit your boxwoods or your broadleaf evergreens with an anti-desiccant as we get closer to December. Not obviously something you need to be worried about too much now, but just something to be considerate about.
Early winter.
But what's going to help you, what's going to help that be more effective is to be proactive with your watering now, because what that does is help keep the moisture in the foliage of the plants, or keep it from escaping the foliage of the plants going forward. So cutting back plants right now. And we've been pruning. We've been on some job sites. We've been pruning, some of the projects that we have. Right now is a good time to get in there and just do any kind of aggressive growth that might be there at the end of the season.
Absolutely. There's plants that you definitely want to cut back in the fall. Your irises, bee balm, phlox, any lilies, salvia, yarrow, hostas, and astilbes. Those you want to do in the fall. You give them a boost of energy when you do that. When they go, they're protected in the winter. They're cut back. They've got less. They've got all that food that they stored up for the winter, and you get a good explosion of foliage in the spring. There is some things that you definitely want to only cut back in the spring, and that's some of your seeded wildflowers, echinacea, sedum, butterfly weed. You want to leave those for the winter, so you still have some activity for your birds to eat. the activity for the birds to drop seeds to help you regrow for the spring.
So that's actually a great point. I never even thought about that. Is thinking about the birds, because in the
birds.
wintertime, I remember sitting at my grandmother's kitchen table, and she used to have a bird feeder outside of it that she used to fill up all the time. And the colors of the birds that used to be in the wintertime are awesome.
Tremendous.
But there's nothing better. So, bird feeders are great, but like, what if it was just, natural?
Natural.
Where the birds would come, with some of the grass tassels, the seed tassels that would stick up, and the coneflower, the echinacea, and those kind of things. That's where it also just gives some texture to the landscape. Well, it was dead. Well, it depends on how you look at it.
Well, and I said hostas in the fall. Another plant that you plant usually near hostas are corabels, the heuchera. You want to actually do those in the spring because you want to protect that crown of that heuchera for the winter. So that's one plant that you want to do in the spring. Again, like you said, coneflowers, you're protecting that crown. So you want those leaves to protect that crown for the winter. And that's why you want to do that one in the spring.
So, as fall starts to take hold, and you start to see the colors start to change, as we already said, you're starting to see them in the walnuts and those sorts of things, the things that lose their leaves rather quickly. You're starting to, that the rest of it is right around the corner. So, you're getting ready to shut off your irrigation systems, which is extremely important that you do this ahead of time, because most irrigation companies, from the time of this recording, labor is a big problem right now. And so you want to make sure that you're on the schedule. You're getting things, at least tentatively, what week you're going to get done, because last year I think we had an early freeze also. And then it warmed up until January again. But, you want to have typically your backflows shut off by Halloween is a typical time you want to have them all done by. And if for some reason that we do get an early freeze or frost, you want to have a blanket handy that or a towel or something that you can wrap your backflow with, just to keep it from popping, because the backflow is what's going to pop. Typically nothing else. Not saying it can't. I've seen basements get wet from poorly blown out irrigation systems. But there's a couple of things that you just want to be paying attention to. Again, cultivate the mulch. Get your fertilizer down after you cultivate, so that way your irrigation system does run if it's still on, or you can water it in. Get those nutrients down into the roots of the trees and the plants to start storing for next year. Because even though the tops of the plants go dormant, the roots are the last thing to stop being active. So the roots will still be active after you're losing leaves and after the trees start growing. So just because you don't see it on top doesn't mean there's not 1,000 or a million billion things going on in the soil with all the microbes and everything else. So you want to be feeding that, so that way it makes everything stronger for the next season. So anything you want to add?
Yeah. You brought up my my love of fall or winter interest plants.
Okay.
And that
sounds like a whole nother episode.
It might be, but we'll do a little addendum here. Red twig dogwoods. They're green right now. You'll see them right now. But once they lose their leaves and we get colder, we get those beautiful bright sticks. And getting that in your landscape and getting a red twig dogwood in there, there's nothing like it against the snow. And it really just even perks you up in the winter. You get that just bright red look. Winter berries. You're going to see the berries. They were pollinated in May and June, and now the berries are starting to pop. And you get those in the winter next to a red twig dogwood. Oh man, you have really got some beautiful winter interest that kind of makes you kind of get through the winter a little bit easier.
These are all things you can be planting right now.
Plant them right now.
They will handle being planted, and they will handle being planted all winter long. Everything. These are very hardy plants. So
very, very hardy plants.
Just things to be thinking about. Just because the season's coming in doesn't mean it's got to stop.
No.
You can keep it going.
No, there's definitely a lot of winter interest. With those things, magnolias, the things that we'll do in the winter time with greenery. You've got a tremendous palette to use in the winter, and you don't realize it's right there for you to take. So
that's the show for today. There's a lot there. And, we've got a lot of good episodes that are scheduled to be coming out. And as I said, we will be keeping this a little bit more consistent. We apologize. It's been an absolute crazy year. I think everybody understands, why in many cases.
Yeah.
But so what I'm going to leave you with is this. If you guys have any questions, we would love nothing more than for you to come in and speak with us at our garden center and just talk about anything and everything gardening, plant related. Like, we love this stuff. We love being challenged with problems and issues to figure out, because it makes us better. Also, we want to help give you the yard that you've always dreamed about. The yard that you have in your head. How do we translate it from your head and put it in your yard? How do we help you get there? You can email us, help@frisellanursery.com or podcast@frisellanursery.com with any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want us to talk about in the podcast. You can reach us at 636-798-2555 or also hello@frisellanursery.com.
That's the one I manage, so you're going to get straight to me if you go to hello.
There you go. That's the one you need to go to. And then you can also visit for all of our fall classes and workshops. They're filling up fast, but as they fill up, we are going to be adding more. So if you see it says full, don't hesitate. Call in, figure it out. We are going to be adding more and more and more to each one that does fill up. So don't worry. But that's frisellanursery.com/events. You can follow us on social media for more information, current information, at Frisella Nursery on Facebook and Instagram. And we're also on YouTube, so like, subscribe. Please share the podcast if it's giving you value, giving you anything that you can execute on the yard. We would really appreciate a subscribe and a share. So until the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. Appreciate you being here. Look forward to having you more often, and we'll be going forward.
Thanks for listening. We love it. I tell everybody, listen to our podcast, listen to us. It's great.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.